A new study by the Media Watch group Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting criticizes PBS's flagship news program, The NewsHour with Jim Lehrer. The study finds that NewsHour interviewed many more male sources than female, that people of color made up 15% of U.S. sources. FAIR also found on the issue of Iraq, NewsHour interviewed 5 times as many guests who advocated staying the course over withdrawing troops. Well, in his new book, Cable News Confidential, My Misadventures in Corporate Media, media critic Jeff Cohen dissects the cable news channels and also finds serious failures in covering the most urgent issues of the day. Jeff is the founder of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, though not with them anymore. He has been the co-host of CNN's Crossfire, a weekly panelist on Fox News Watch, and a daily commentator on MSNBC. He joins me in the Firehouse studio now. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you.
It's good to have you with me. First, talk about Cable News Confidential, your experiences in the media and how it relates to the climate of today.
I live to tell about it. I was inside as deep as a progressive media critic has ever gotten. And what I found at places like CNN and MSNBC, the #1 fear among the working reporters, the producers, is of doing anything that could get them or their channel accused of being liberal. And I saw the spectrum that's constructed, the spectrum of debate is center to right. And, you know, people blame that on Fox News, you know, Hannity and Combs, a phony GE to GM spectrum. But it was really CNN and PBS that invented that, years before there was a Fox News. So in the book, I describe how that gets constructed and why almost half of the political spectrum is kept out of political debates on a regular basis on TV news, especially cable.
Explain how it happens. And you were also a producer for Donahue, for the Phil Donahue Show.
Well, we were trying to change the situation at Donahue. But I mean, the people that run TV, they have a corporate view. Their idea of balance is to get a conservative Republican to debate a conservative Democrat. For years on Crossfire, the host was Michael Kinsley of the New Republic. And every night he announced, "I'm Michael Kinsley from the left." After doing that for 6 years, he gave up his seat, and that's when they tested me to be the co-host. And a reporter asked Kinsley, after 6 years, "What are your politics?" And he described himself as a wishy-washy moderate. And that's typical. When I was tested for the show, I was co-hosting with Bob Novak, Crossfire. And I asked Novak, you know, settle this for me, Bob, who's further, during a commercial break, who's further right, you or Pat Buchanan? And he starts railing about Buchanan being a liberal New Dealer on economics. He said, look, I was an Eisenhower Republican in the 50s. I've moved further right every year since. And, you know, look at who represents the left on TV. It would never be someone who said I was a Kennedy Democrat in the 60s and have moved further left every year since. It's just unheard of. So they construct a situation where it's center-right, and by having the center represent the left, they don't have to worry about corporate sponsor flight. They don't have to worry about corporations being attacked in a serious way. When I was tested for the CNN Crossfire job, that was a concern of theirs, that I would be criticizing the nightly sponsor. There's no doubt they made it explicit to me. And then, you know, when we were trying to redress this problem on MSNBC, years later, I'm the senior producer at the Donahue Show, and the war starts coming. And management, you know, we have to remember, FAIR has always talked about how these media outlets are strict corporate hierarchies and the powers at the top. Well, it's theoretical until you're on the inside and it happens to you. And in the last months of Donahue, we were ordered by management at MSNBC, every time we booked one guest who was anti-war, we had to book 2 that were pro-war. If we booked 2 guests on the left, we had to book 3 on the right. At one meeting, a producer suggested booking Michael Moore and was told for ideological balance she would need 3 right-wingers. And, you know, I used to think about proposing Chomsky as a guest, but our stage couldn't accommodate the 38 right-wingers we would have needed for balance. I mean, when you see this kind of suppression, when we would talk about booking Scott Ritter, one of the most articulate dissenters, a skeptic of the WMD evidence, because we had a steady parade of weapons experts that got everything wrong, and they were unrebutted. On MSNBC, I was a pundit. I couldn't discuss the weather without being balanced by at least one fire-breathing right-winger. But the weapons experts got on all by themselves, and everything they said was wrong. And we tried to book Scott Ritter, and it was like clockwork. We'd hear in the building at MSNBC, oh, we hear he's getting covert funds from the government of Saddam Hussein. It was completely false. A smear aimed at getting an articulate dissenting voice off of mainstream TV. I'm sure it wasn't just being heard at MSNBC, it was being heard at other channels. And the irony is, I learned years later that one of the experts, one of the advocates I was always debating on MSNBC was, in fact, a recipient of covert government funds. The covert government funder was the Bush administration. I'm talking about Armstrong Williams, who got all that money to push No Child Left Behind. No one invited me into the No Pundit Left Behind program. So yeah, I mean, the spectrum that I saw in TV is enforced. There's always exceptions. I was at Fox News on weekends every week for 5 years. There's always exceptions to the rule, but this rule is a general parade of a narrow center-right GE to GM spectrum.
And then, of course, Donahue was forced off the air. Was it because his show was failing ratings-wise?
Well, think about it. When his show was taken off the air 3 weeks before the Iraq invasion began, it was the most watched program on the channel. And it's very rare in TV news where the most watched program, or TV, where a most watched program gets canceled. And you know, the day after Donahue was terminated, that memo leaked out. It was never supposed to get public. An NBC internal memo about MSNBC. It said Donahue represents a difficult public face for NBC in a time of war. He seems to delight in presenting guests who are anti-war, anti-Bush, and skeptical of the administration's motives, unquote. What they really worried about is we tried to get dissenters on there that would say, you know, this might not be about weapons. This impending invasion might be about oil or military bases or empire. And to question motives is almost a cardinal rule. To say that the motives of U.S. foreign policy might not be pure, that's not something they want. And you know, that NBC internal memo that leaked a day after Donahue was terminated, it went on to describe their nightmare scenario. Donahue would become a home for the liberal anti-war agenda, I'm quoting, at the same time that our competitors are waving the flag at every opportunity, unquote. Now, I know what you were doing in that period, and I know what independent journalists were trying to do, which was ask the tough questions before our young men and women are sent to kill or be killed overseas. They wouldn't let us do it. And they wanted us waving flags. And what I saw inside the mainstream at MSNBC and elsewhere is when journalists are so busy waving flags, they don't have the energy to do their jobs, which is to ask the questions before the bombs start flying.
What do you think of NBC host Keith Olbermann now? You wrote a piece, Is Olbermann on thin ice? He is speaking out vociferously.
Right. Olbermann is an exception to the rule, like we were briefly. The warning, I think, media activists have got to be on guard. I know FAIR is on guard. I know Media Matters for America is on guard. Olbermann is the top-rated show on MSNBC. His ratings are booming because he does independent journalism. And, but he's got the same management. And the owner of MSNBC, we should have mentioned, is General Electric, makes a lot of money from war. I know these management people. Because what's changed for Olbermann, the reason he's possible, is the political zeitgeist that's changed. Politics has changed. This upcoming election is one of the most important in years, and politics may really change. That's what's helping Olbermann. But if things went the other way, and somehow the conservatives were on the ascent again, if you're working in a big corporate media outlet, they don't let you kick the conservatives if they're up. The only time you get a chance at the conservatives is when they're down. And it's important that the political zeitgeist change and continue to change in a progressive direction, and then the Olbermanns get a little support. But if anything were to happen to Olbermann, the media activism movement, Amy, is so much stronger now than when they were suppressing us at Donahue years ago. A lot has changed in 4 years, and one of the real changes in the environment is media activism is stronger. Internet activism is stronger. Olbermann is ready to be supported in a way people weren't even getting the news that Donahue needed support. Donahue's being muzzled. It's a great change in the last few years.
Also, I mean, just in terms of a business decision, Olbermann's doubled his audience as the highest rated show.
But we could have doubled our audience. They knew that. They wouldn't let us double our audience. They were less interested in us ramping up our ratings than in tamping down our content before the war. Remember, when Donahue was on the air, Bush's popularity was pretty high. The war was just coming. Now the war is in a shambles, and Bush's popularity is very low. That's giving Olbermann the breathing room, and I commend him. I think he's doing a great job.